Imagine you live near a college campus in a fairly large city. While looking up a summer program schedule, you decide to sign your 12-year-old daughter up for a basketball camp at the local college campus. It seems like a great program where she can spend some time during the day with the college basketball players and their coaches. One evening after camp, your daughter comes home and tells you she was alone with one of the coaches in the locker room and was uncomfortable with the situation. Not knowing where you should go from here, you do a quick search on the university policy website to see what it says about minors on campus. The search shows you that the term minor turns up no results. So what do you do next? You've trusted this institution to protect your child while on their college campus. I'm Holly Seckinger, and we will also hear from Lindsay Hugo and Mackenzie Oliker about why we think it's important for all institutions to have a policy protecting minors while they are on their college campus. We will hear from Lindsay, who will give us background from our peer schools that have instituted similar policies, some as far back as 10 years ago. And Mackenzie will close our presentation for us. I think we've all heard the well-publicized cases that have hit the news in recent years. An admired school figure, a culture of complacency. We have Penn State, an assistant coach that had been engaging in sexual abuse of children over a period of at least 15 years. 3 Penn State school officials were charged with perjury, obstruction of justice, and failure to report suspected child abuse. We have Michigan State. A teen doctor was sexually harassing female students. The former dean of the Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine was charged with failing to protect patients. What is your school doing to proactively protect students from issues happening on campus? What are we doing to be proactive instead of reactive after something happens? Ohio University should have a policy protecting minors on campus as students, as participants in camps, and just generally when they are in the care of faculty, staff, and volunteers in the Athens community. We should be proactive and address the situation before scandals such as Jerry Sandusky and Larry Nassar took place. Most of the institutions we compare ourselves to already have plans in place. What are we doing to protect our youth? I will now turn it over to Lindsay to tell us a little about what other schools are doing.
Thank you, Holly. I'd now like to talk a little bit more about the different institutions that we looked at to compare policies. First, we looked at West Virginia University and Iowa State University. The Office of Institutional Research at Ohio University considers these peer schools. We also looked at Ohio State University, which from a regional perspective we are often compared to. Lastly, we looked at Pennsylvania State University and the University of Michigan as schools that have best practices for policies regarding minors on campus. Nearly all of these institutions have policies that have either been recently renewed or recently established. For example, West Virginia University just formally launched their policy a few months ago. When considering these policies, first and foremost, we need to note whether or not a policy has been formally adopted. Ohio University is the only one of the schools that we reviewed that did not have a formal policy. This is the first step into ensuring children's safety on campus. When looking at the specific policies, we determined that scope needs to be clearly defined to ensure we know who the policy applies to and also who the policy protects. OSU does a wonderful job of clearly defining who the policy applies to by including it on every single page of their policy document. Next, when developing a policy, it is important to consider the different required components that individuals hosting minor on-campus programs will be required to complete. This often includes registration, background checks, and training. For example, for required registration, the University of Michigan has a separate webpage dedicated to registering programs that host minors on campus. This ensures that all of the information is collected and housed in one place, and is also extremely easy to find on their website. Next, background checks. As you can see, nearly all of the schools, including Ohio University, have background checks. While we require background checks at Ohio University, again, this is not formally indicated in a policy. Penn State does a wonderful job not only requiring background checks as part of their minors on campus policy, but they have taken a second step and developed a full policy around background checks, going into much greater detail for people to view as needed. Lastly, training. Ohio University does currently require training for individuals hosting minor on-campus programs. However, this training is only available to internal faculty and staff and cannot be shared externally. This is an area that needs improvement for Ohio University. Next, an important policy consideration is reporting child abuse and neglect. As Holly noted in the beginning, this is one of the key areas that initiated a wave of these policies being implemented. All of the schools that we viewed require reporting of child abuse and neglect and provide resources for the appropriate phone numbers and for the appropriate parties to call to ensure childhood safety. Ohio University does not provide this information and does not have it formally stated on their website. Last but not least, an important policy consideration is accountability and compliance. You'll notice that Penn State and the University of Michigan both do not have a clause that requires accountability and compliance for their policies. These were two of the first implemented policies, and the University of Michigan is due to be updated this year. However, more recently updated policies such as West Virginia University, Iowa State, and Ohio State University have all been updated to include a specific section that outlines the repercussions of not following a minors on campus policy. As you can see from our policy comparison, there are several sections that need to be addressed in a policy for minors on campus. First, the scope needs to be clearly defined so individuals understand who this policy does and does not apply to. Second, requirements regarding registration, background checks, and training need to be clearly outlined. Then, child abuse and neglect reporting needs to be included in these policies. Lastly, the policy should include a section around accountability and compliance. In addition to the formal policy, Ohio University can also consider best practices which help the university fully implement the policies. For example, Iowa State has an advisory committee comprised of several individuals that are engaged in minor on-campus programs. This committee ensures that the policy remains up to date and that there are a number of people available if an issue arises on campus. Michigan has a clear website that outlines individual sections that follow the policy guidelines. For example, they have a section on their website to read the policy, a section for registering programs, a section for background checks, and a section for training. This ensures that information is readily accessible for all of those interested, including program volunteers and parents. West Virginia also includes a section in their policy around hiring minors. Many individuals volunteer under the age of 18, especially high school students, and West Virginia policy provides additional guidelines around those specific volunteers. Last but not least, several of these policies included a code of conduct, which further describes how participants should behave when they're in the presence of minors on campus. This code of conduct is often applicable to all university faculty and staff and external volunteers or program leaders. The code of conduct is another best practice that Ohio University could consider implementing. With all of these in mind, we'd like to conclude with Mackenzie talking a little bit more about the importance of a policy regarding minors on campus.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's time to mitigate risk here at Ohio University. As displayed by our peer schools, there is an urgent need to develop a minors on campus policy. The Jerry Sandusky case at Penn State and the Larry Nasser case at the University of Michigan was a wake-up call for so many institutions. And as we've seen by Lindsay's comparison chart, institutions have been rapidly updating their minor on-campus policies. So let's examine this urgency. First and foremost, we have a duty to protect minors here at Ohio University. Our policy, like all the others we examined, will require background checks, training, and explicitly state expectations for contact with minors on campus. With this policy, it will be clear that an authorized adult is to never be with a child alone in a private space, and the training will provide best practices and additional food for thought. Combined with background checks, reporting programs with minors to campus administrators, and other implementations, we can maximize safety for minors. Ohio University should not wait for tragedy and harm of a young person to create a policy. We should mitigate the risk now. Second, if something were to happen to a minor on campus while we don't have a policy, Ohio University is in a risk in many ways itself. Legally, Ohio University has no protection and could rightfully be sued. As we have not taken the proper steps to train, educate, complete background checks, our legal defense would be futile. Earlier this year, Penn State reported that they paid $109 million in settlements to Jerry Sandusky's victims. This does not include the price to their reputation. With a policy that supported background checks, reporting, and other implementations, the university could have prevented, or at the very least mitigated harm to so many minors. But instead, they are paying millions. Does Ohio University want to be in this position? Do we want our reputation to be that we do not care for our minors? We must step up to the plate, follow best practices, and protect minors. Ohio University must create a minors on campus policy. We are aware that there is currently a committee discussing potential policies for minors on campus. As we've stated the urgency, our recommendations are to follow best practices as exemplified by our peer institutions. We must define the scope. Who does this policy affect? Are there any exempt programs, such as BSO? And how is it different on regional campuses? How will we implement registration? And who will conduct this process? How quickly can we get background checks processed? Will Ohio University have an internal office that can do these things? Who will host the trainings? Who will create the trainings? How will they be marked and tracked to make sure that everybody who needs to be attending them is? Who will make sure that authorized users and program hosts are being held accountable for this policy? As you can see, there are many things that Ohio University must consider to protect our minors, and we are behind. After creating the policy, Ohio University can follow other best practices, such as Michigan State. As you can see on the screen, Michigan State adopted a website so that everything was clearly defined and easily laid out for users. On the website, users could read the policy, they could plan and register their programs and events, they could figure out how to conduct background checks and where to go to get these, and they could also sign up for training. Ohio University is in need of a similar platform so that we are all aware of. After implementation of the policy, Ohio University must make sure that this is a user-friendly process. After Ohio University creates its policy, it must make sure that its process is easy for users to follow. After implementing the policy, Ohio University needs to make sure that the process is laid out in a user-friendly manner and that they are able to hold users accountable. One way that we could do this is by creating a website. When you type in minor for the University of Michigan, this website pops up. As you can see, users can see exactly what they need to do to follow the Minors on Campus policy. They can read the policy in an easy format, they can plan and register their program or event, they can conduct background checks and know where to go for these, and they can also sign up for training. This one-stop shop ensures that nobody is missing any of the pieces of the Minors on Campus policy, and it is holding the university itself accountable and also protecting minors. When you search minors, Ohio University, nothing pops up. This is a terrifying thought. Today, Ohio University had hundreds of students on campus for Ohio Business Week. There are also summer camps, Upward Bound, RILA for Rotary, and other external events that happen on this campus every single summer. Thousands of students pass through our campus, and we don't have a policy, a way to protect them, or a way to protect ourselves. As we've stated before, Ohio University is behind. The need to protect minors is urgent. Our charge is not trivial. It is of paramount necessity for Ohio University to be proactive and not reactive. Thank you for your time and consideration of our policy.